with a smug, self-satisfied grin plastered across his face. Jimmy Kimmel arrogantly ambushed Melania Trump and Ivanka Trump by mockingly parading the vicious rumor that Barron wasn't Melania's real son and that Ivanka had secretly been his mother all along, parading his so-called leaked evidence like some big, brave truth-teller who just cracked the scandal of the century. Only for the two women to calmly tear his desperate ratings grab ambush to shreds and drop a devastating bombshell that exposed how Jimmy had been deliberately fed completely fabricated documents by political operatives with direct ties to his own network. The studio buzzed with that familiar pre-show energy as Jimmy Kimmel walked in, nodding at the crew and dropping into his chair behind the desk. He flipped through his notes one last time, the usual confident grin on his face. But tonight, something felt off. The air was thicker. Then the side doors opened. Melania Trump stepped out first, tall and poised in a sleek, dark dress, moving like she owned every inch of the stage without even trying. Right behind her came Ivanka, sharper and more energetic in a crisp pantsuit, her smile bright and ready for the crowd. The audience erupted in cheers, phones already up, but the contrast hit everyone instantly. Melania calm and icy, Ivanka warm but commanding. Jimmy stood up with his big host smile. "Ladies, welcome to the show. It's great to have you both here tonight." Melania gave a small nod and polite smile, while Ivanka waved to the crowd and said, "Thanks for having us, Jimmy. Good to be here." They settled into the seats as the applause died down. Jimmy kicked things off easy, asking about recent trips and how life had been lately. Melania answered smoothly about family events, and Ivanka jumped in with a quick story about a charity thing she'd just done. The laughs came light and polite. Everything felt normal on the surface. The conversation flowed easily at first, with Jimmy steering it toward family life like he was just making small talk. "So, how are things at home these days?" he asked, leaning forward with that friendly smile. Melania mentioned something about quiet family dinners and Barron growing up fast. Ivanka nodded along, sharing a quick story about how proud she was of her siblings and keeping things normal for the kids. The audience chuckled at a light joke Jimmy slipped in about teenage boys and their appetites. For a minute, it still felt like a regular interview. Then, Jimmy's tone shifted. He sat up straighter, his face serious now. "There's been a lot of talk online, and even from some politicians lately. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett has been pushing this rumor pretty hard. She claims Barron isn't actually your biological son, Melania, and that Ivanka might be his real mother." The words dropped like a bomb. Gasps rippled through the audience. Jimmy didn't wait. He hit a button on his desk, and a big screen lit up behind them with a short clip. It showed what looked like a leaked DNA report, blurry but readable, with a former hospital nurse's anonymous statement claiming irregularities around the birth. The nurse's voice played low. The timeline never added up, and the mother listed wasn't who everyone thought. The clip was only 20 seconds, but it felt like forever. Melania's hand tightened hard on the arm of her chair, knuckles turning white. Her face stayed mostly calm, but her jaw locked. Beside her, Ivanka kept a cold little smile, but her eyes went dark and sharp, like steel. The whole studio seemed to freeze. No more laughs, just stunned silence and phones held up higher. Melania leaned toward the microphone before Jimmy could say anything else. Her voice came out steady and ice cold. "My husband already warned you about cheap shots last time. Did you forget?" The words cut through the air. No yelling, just pure sharpness that made the audience lean forward. Jimmy blinked but didn't flinch. The tension in the room jumped in a heartbeat. Cameras zoomed in tight on all three faces. Jimmy held his ground, tapping his cards once. "People are talking about this everywhere, ladies. Then why do the reports keep coming?" Ivanka leaned forward in her seat, her posture straight and controlled. She looked Jimmy dead in the eyes and said, "We are not commenting on this, Jimmy." And you know why. Her voice was calm, but the warning underneath it was unmistakable. The studio fell into a heavy silence. No one coughed. No one shifted in their seats. The audience could feel the shift happening right in front of them. Jimmy paused for half a second, then pushed ahead. He tapped the control on his desk again, and the big screen behind them lit up with a new document. "Let's talk about this email that just surfaced," he said, his tone serious but excited. "It's from a former nanny who worked closely with the family for years. She describes heavy secrecy around the pregnancy, private medical suites, limited visitors, and instructions that no one was allowed to discuss details. She even questions whether the official timeline adds up." The email text scrolled slowly across the screen, highlighting the most damaging lines in yellow. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as people read along. Melania's hand gripped the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. For the first time that night, her famous composure cracked. Her voice shook for just a split second before she caught it. She rose halfway out of her chair, then sat back down hard, leaning toward the microphone. "I gave birth to Barron on March 20th, 2016, at New York Presbyterian Hospital," she said, her words sharp and emotional. "I was in that room. I carried him. I held him before anyone else. These stories are lies from people who weren't even there. I don't care who this so-called nanny is. She has no idea what she's talking about." Her eyes stayed locked on Jimmy the entire time. The raw edge in her voice sent a visible wave through the front rows. Several people looked genuinely uncomfortable. Ivanka didn't miss a beat. She placed a protective hand briefly on Melania's arm and jumped in, her voice turning colder and more commanding. "This is not just a rumor, Jimmy. This is straight-up defamation. I can end your show right now if I want to." She said it plainly, like she was stating the weather. But the power behind the words made the entire studio go dead quiet. Phones that had been recording were now held completely still. Jimmy tried to play it cool. He forced a tight, awkward laugh and raised both hands. "Come on, ladies. We're just asking the questions people are already talking about online." Ivanka cut him off instantly, her stare never softening. "One phone call, Jimmy. That's all it takes. Defamation laws are very clear, especially when you're attacking a minor on live national television. Keep pushing and you'll find out exactly how serious this gets." Her tone was ice-cold and professional. The threat felt real. The audience sat frozen, eyes wide, barely breathing. Jimmy's smile faded completely. His jaw tightened. He slammed his stack of cards down on the desk with a loud smack that echoed through the studio. "The nation wants the truth tonight," he said, his voice rising with real frustration and challenge. "And we're not leaving here until we get it." The lights suddenly felt hotter. The silence that followed was thick. Every camera stayed locked on the three of them. Jimmy wasn't letting up. He leaned forward, eyes locked on both women, and hit the screen again. "Let's look at this photo that's been circulating for years," he said, his voice sharper now. A clear, old picture popped up on the big monitor behind them. Ivanka, holding newborn Barron in her arms, smiling down at the baby, while Melania stood slightly in the background. This was taken right after the birth. People see this, and they wonder, why does it look like Ivanka is the one bonding with him first? The audience murmured loudly. Some people even pointed at the screen. The image stayed up, big and undeniable, feeding the tension in the room. Melania's eyes flashed with anger. She reached into a small folder she had brought with her and pulled out a printed email. "You want to talk about real evidence, Jimmy? Here's one I received just 2 hours before we came on your show." She held it up toward the camera. "This is from a known political operative who works against my husband. He's the one paying people to spread these lies." The email says, "Push the Ivanka mother theory hard. It will destroy their family image. This isn't random gossip. This is a coordinated attack. Her voice stayed strong, but you could hear the fire behind every word. She turned the paper so the audience could see the sender's name and timestamp. Before Jimmy could respond, Ivanka suddenly stood up. She reached into her jacket, pulled out her phone, and held it high. "That's enough," she said loudly. "I'm calling my lawyer right now. Live on your show." The studio went completely silent as she dialed the number and put it on speaker. Everyone could hear the ringing. A few seconds later, a serious-looking man appeared on the big screen via video call. It was Ivanka's lawyer. "Ms. Trump, I'm here," he said. "We've reviewed the clips from tonight. The arrest warrant for defamation and harassment is being prepared as we speak. We'll have it ready within the hour." The lawyer's voice was calm and professional, but the words hit like a hammer. Jimmy's face went pale for about 5 full seconds. His mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. Sweat glistened on his forehead under the hot lights. He looked genuinely rattled, glancing quickly off stage like he was hoping someone would cut the feed. But then he recovered, gripping the desk. "You're really doing this live? On national television?" Melania leaned in closer to the microphone, her voice softer but full of emotion. "When I first held Barron, right after he was born, he looked up at me with those big eyes. I whispered to him that I would always protect him no matter what. That moment was mine. No one can take that away or twist it into a lie. He is my son." The raw honesty in her words hung in the air. A few people in the audience wiped their eyes. Right then, Jimmy's producer ran out from the side of the stage, leaned in fast, and whispered urgently in his ear, "The network wants you to stop right now. They're getting calls. Shut it down." Jimmy listened, then shook his head firmly. "No," he said, loud enough for the mics to catch. "We're not stopping. The nation wants the truth tonight, and we're staying right here until we get it." The tension in the studio was now explosive. Cameras stayed locked on the three of them as Ivanka remained standing, phone still in her hand, and Melania stared Jimmy down with steel in her eyes. Ivanka didn't hesitate. She tapped her phone screen again, put it on speaker, and spoke loud and clear so the whole studio could hear. "This is Ivanka Trump. Issue the warrant for defamation right now. We have more than enough from tonight's broadcast." Her voice was steady and commanding. The audience froze. You could hear the lawyer on the other end confirming, "Warrant is in process, Ms. Trump." The threat suddenly felt completely real. Jimmy's eyes widened. He knew he had to flip the momentum fast. Hold on, he said quickly, hitting a button on his desk. "Before we go any further, let's hear from someone who actually worked with the family." A video call popped up on the big screen. A former Trump family staffer appeared, looking nervous but serious. "The rumor that Ivanka is Barron's mother is completely false," the staffer said. "Melania gave birth to him. I was there." The audience let out a collective breath, but then the staffer added, "However, there was another private family matter involving health issues during the pregnancy that they kept quiet. It wasn't what people think, but it explains some of the secrecy." The revelation landed like another bomb. Gasps filled the studio. Melania's face changed completely. For the first time all night, real anger broke through. She slammed her hand on the armrest and leaned straight into the microphone, her voice cracking with emotion. "You crossed the line, Jimmy. This is my son. How dare you drag him through this circus on live TV?" Her eyes were blazing. Tears of rage glistened, but didn't fall. Ivanka reached over and placed a firm, protective hand on her mother's shoulder. Then she turned slowly toward Jimmy, her expression ice cold. "You just lost your career tonight." Jimmy tried to speak but fumbled. His hands were shaking. The stack of cards slipped from his fingers and scattered across the desk and floor. For a few terrifying seconds, he looked completely lost. Then one man in the audience, a random guest who'd been invited as a fan, suddenly stood up and shouted, "Let him ask, Jimmy! The people deserve answers!" The outburst shocked everyone. Security moved toward the guy immediately. Ivanka wasn't done. She quickly dialed another number and turned the volume up on the studio speakers. The call connected. Donald Trump's unmistakable voice came through loud and clear. "Jimmy, I warned you last time about this garbage. You keep this up and you'll regret it for the rest of your life. That's a promise." The entire studio went deathly silent. No one moved. No one breathed. The weight of that voice, combined with everything that had just happened, crushed the room. Cameras stayed locked on Melania's furious face, Ivanka's steel gaze, and Jimmy sitting there stunned among his fallen cards. The tension was suffocating. It felt like the whole show could end at any second. Then, Melania and Ivanka stood up at the exact same moment, perfectly synchronized. Without saying another word, they turned and walked off the stage with calm, deliberate steps. Melania's head held high, Ivanka's shoulders straight. The audience watched in stunned silence as the two women disappeared into the wings. No goodbyes, no final glare. Just a powerful, united exit that spoke louder than anything they had said all night. Jimmy sat there frozen for a second, then forced himself to keep going. "Well, folks, that just happened," he said, trying to laugh it off and salvage the segment. "Let's see if we can—" Suddenly, the studio lights cut off. The bright stage went dark in an instant. Only the main camera light stayed on. Jimmy's producer had killed the lights on orders from upstairs. Jimmy blinked hard under the single spotlight, then looked straight into the camera, his voice raw and serious. "Tonight you saw power in action. Real power. Not jokes, not ratings. Power." The words hung heavy in the darkness. The audience started whispering and shifting. Then, Ivanka appeared again at the edge of the stage, just inside the wings. She stopped, turned back, and looked directly at Jimmy. Her voice carried clearly through the quiet studio. "Next time you want the truth, ask your own sources, not tabloids." She let the line land, then disappeared for good. The studio exploded into loud chatter. People were talking over each other, some cheering, some arguing. Right then, the big screen behind Jimmy's desk lit up with a surprise message. It was from the former hospital nurse whose clip Jimmy had shown earlier. The text read in big letters, "I confirm Melania Trump is Barron's biological mother. I was in the delivery room. The rumors are 100% false." The audience erupted even louder. Gasps, applause, and shocked laughter mixed together. The show was over, but the chaos had just begun. Later that night, long after the audience had left, Jimmy sat alone in the empty studio. The lights were low. He replayed the footage on his monitor, watching himself push the questions, watching the cards fall, hearing Trump's voice again. He rubbed his face and leaned back in his chair. For the first time in years, he realized he had gone too far. He had touched something he couldn't control. The main screen slowly faded to black. White text appeared across the darkness. One question. Two mothers. One unforgettable night. The studio went completely silent, leaving only that final line burning on the screen as the credits rolled into nothing.